That night felt heavier than usual. The air was still, the street empty, and my mind crowded with the same arguments that had been repeating for weeks at home. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the dim light slipping through the curtains, wondering how two people who once shared everything had now become strangers living under the same roof. The silence at home had started to feel louder than any shouting ever could. While I was staring at my phone, trying to distract myself from the tension, a message suddenly appeared. It was from my neighbor. We were never close, just polite, occasional conversations when collecting the mail or crossing paths near the gate. He was quiet, calm, and carried a gentleness that wasn't common around here. His message was short, almost hesitant, as if he wasn't sure whether he should send it or not. "If you're awake, come over for a minute. I want to show you something." For a moment, I didn't move. I just stared at the screen, my chest tightening with confusion. Why tonight? Why me? And why did the idea of stepping out feel easier than staying inside this suffocating house? I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he needed help with something. Maybe it was urgent. Maybe he had found something that belonged to me. I kept creating excuses, even though a small part of me knew I wasn't going because of those reasons. I was going because I needed air. I needed distance from the coldness that had settled at home. I needed someone who didn't look at me with disappointment. When I stepped outside, the night wrapped around me like a secret. There was barely any sound except my own footsteps on a quiet road. His house was just a few steps away, lit by a single dim porch light that flickered every few seconds. It made everything look softer, almost unreal. He opened the door before I even knocked, as if he had been waiting right behind it. His eyes looked tired, yet warm, and for the first time I noticed how carefully he examined my expression, like he could sense the weight I was carrying. "You look troubled," he said gently. "Come inside." I hesitated, my heartbeat loud in my ears. This wasn't something I should be doing. I knew that. But something about the way he spoke, the way he stepped aside to make space for me, felt comforting, too comforting for someone who wasn't supposed to matter this much. Inside, the house was quiet, warmer than mine, almost peaceful. A soft lamp glowed in the corner, giving the room a calm, golden hue. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't pry. He just offered me a seat and waited like he knew I needed a place to breathe. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension in my chest begin to loosen, even if just a little. And as the door clicked shut behind me, I had a sudden, sharp feeling that stepping into his house might change more than just my night that he sat across from me. Not too close, but close enough that I could feel the quiet attention he was giving me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The ticking of the small wall clock filled the silence, steady and soft, like it was trying to remind me to breathe. "You don't have to say anything," he finally whispered. "You just look like someone who hasn't been listened to in a long time." The words sank into me deeper than they should have. Maybe because they were true. Maybe because no one had said something that gentle to me in months. I stared down at my hands, trying to pull myself together before the emotions slipped out in front of him. "It's just been hard," I murmured, surprised at how easily the truth escaped me. "Everything at home feels empty. We talk, but it's like talking through a wall. I don't recognize us anymore." He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer fake solutions. He just listened, really listened, with a focus that felt almost dangerous in how comforting it was. His eyes stayed on me, steady and calm, like he wasn't afraid of my silence or my vulnerability. "I've seen it," he said softly. "You walk around with so much weight on your face, it made me worry." Hearing that made my chest tighten. I didn't know he noticed me like that. I didn't know anyone noticed me like that anymore. For a moment, I looked up at him, and our eyes met. It wasn't dramatic or intense. It was quiet, warm, like he was offering something I didn't know I needed. "I shouldn't be here," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "I know," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I didn't call you here to make things harder. I just didn't want you to be alone tonight." There was a softness in his tone that made it impossible to get up and leave. The room felt safe, almost too safe, like it was inviting me to rest a little longer. I leaned back into the couch, my exhaustion catching up to me. He moved closer, not enough to touch, but enough to make the air between us feel different. Warmer, a kind of warmth I hadn't felt at home in a long time. "You deserve someone who notices when you're hurting," he said quietly. Someone who cares. The words hit me harder than I expected. A small, helpless sound escaped me. Half a sigh, half a confession of how tired I really was. He hesitated, then gently placed a hand on my shoulder, slow enough that I could pull away if I wanted to. But I didn't. His touch wasn't bold or intrusive. It was careful, almost cautious, like he knew exactly how fragile the moment was. "You're not alone," he murmured. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt seen. Really seen. And that scared me more than anything because I knew feelings like this didn't stay harmless for long. Yet, I didn't step back. I stayed. And that small decision changed the way the night felt, subtly, dangerously, beautifully. His hand stayed on my shoulder for only a moment, but it left a warmth that lingered long after he pulled it back. I should have moved away. I should have stood up, opened the door, and gone home before things slipped into a place I couldn't return from. But instead, I sat there, trapped between guilt and comfort, both pulling at me in different directions. "You look exhausted," he said gently, "like you've been carrying everything alone." I let out a slow, shaky breath. "Maybe I have." He shifted a little closer, not enough to touch again, but enough to make my pulse pick up. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, filled with something unspoken. I could feel his eyes on me, watching, waiting, trying to understand what I wasn't saying. "You don't have to pretend here," he whispered. "Not with me." Something inside me cracked, not loudly but quietly, like a thin wall giving way. I didn't speak. I didn't know what to say. Instead, my eyes drifted toward the window, where the night looked peaceful, untouched by everything happening inside this room. He followed my gaze. "It's strange, isn't it? How everything outside looks so calm while we're falling apart on the inside." A soft, sad smile tugged at my lips. "Yeah, it is." Silence settled between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of tension, full of questions, full of the kind of closeness that shouldn't exist between neighbors. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, his voice dropping even lower. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. "I didn't call you here just to show you something," he admitted. "I noticed how you've been hurting, and I hated seeing you walk past my house every day like you were disappearing a little more each time." My chest tightened. I looked at him, really looked, and realized there had been something in his eyes for a long time, something I had never dared to interpret. "Why me?" I whispered that he swallowed, his jaw tensing for just a second. "Because you're the only person who makes me feel something real. And I know you feel it, too, even if you're fighting it." His honesty hit me like a wave. Unexpected, overwhelming, dangerous. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Instead, my breath caught in my throat. He leaned closer, slower this time, giving me every chance to pull away. Our faces were only inches apart now, the space between us charged with an emotion I couldn't deny anymore. But before anything could happen, my phone lit up. A message from home. A simple one. Short, cold, a reminder of the life waiting for me. A reminder of the promises I hadn't broken yet, but was dangerously close to breaking. The sound of the notification cut through the moment like a knife. I flinched slightly, pulling back just enough to breathe again. "I should go," I said softly, though part of me didn't want it. He nodded, but there was something sad in his eyes, something he didn't try to hide. "I know," he whispered, "but you don't have to pretend with me. Not even now." I stood up slowly, my legs heavier than before. The night felt colder when I stepped toward the door, colder than when I first arrived. "Good night," I murmured. "Good night," he replied, his voice low, lingering in the air even after I walked out. And as I stepped back into the quiet street, I knew the hardest part wasn't leaving his house. It was leaving everything I felt inside it. The walk home felt longer than it ever had before. Every step echoed with the weight of what almost happened and what already had, at least emotionally. The house looked the same from the outside, dark, silent, ordinary, but when I opened the door, a cold wave of reality washed over me. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. The untouched cushion on the sofa, the half-finished cup of tea on the table, the same heavy silence, waiting like an unspoken question. But something inside me had shifted, and I could feel it with every heartbeat that I set my phone on the counter and stared at the message I'd received earlier. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't concern. It was a simple, emotionless reminder about something small, a chore, a detail, a responsibility. Nothing that reached me. Nothing that touched the exhaustion I had been drowning in. I sank into the sofa, pressing my palms against my eyes. The warmth of my neighbor's house felt like a memory already. Too soft, too gentle, too tempting. A place where I wasn't invisible. A place where someone actually heard me. But here was the life I had chosen. The life I had promised to protect, even if it no longer protected me. All through the night, I kept replaying everything in my mind. The way he listened, the way he looked at me, the way I didn't step away when I should have. And underneath all of it, a sharp guilt pulsed like a reminder. I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't take back. The next morning arrived with a quiet heaviness. The house remained cold, both literally and emotionally. There was no good morning, no glance, no acknowledgement. Only silence, the same silence that had driven me out the door the night before. I found myself standing near the window, watching his house across the street. The curtains were drawn. No sign of him. But the memory of the way he said, "You don't have to pretend here," felt painfully vivid. A small part of me wanted to cross the street again, to feel seen again, to feel something again. But I knew I couldn't. I took a long breath and stepped back from the window. Later that day, when I stepped outside to throw something away, I saw him standing near his gate. Not close enough to call out, not far enough to ignore. Our eyes met for just a second. His expression was gentle, respectful, but filled with something unspoken that he didn't approach. He didn't push. He didn't try to pull me back into that moment. He simply gave me a small, understanding nod, one that said he knew the line we had almost crossed and that he wouldn't make me cross it again. That I nodded back, equally quiet. And that was as I walked back into my house. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that I had stepped away before everything collapsed. Sadness that the only place I felt understood wasn't the place I belonged to. But maybe that was the point. Sometimes temptation doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, in a warm room, a soft voice, a moment where someone finally listens. And sometimes the hardest part isn't resisting the feeling. It's facing what the feeling reveals. That in the end, the night with my neighbor didn't break my relationship. That IT exposed how broken it already was.